October 14, 1996. 7:42 p.m. A quiet hillside home above Mulholland Drive. The city is still glowing below, but the house itself is calm. Too calm, the kind of stillness that comes after a long campaign finally ends. Inside, the answering machine sits on a side table near the phone, red light dark, tape untouched. The film has been out for weeks now. Reviews landed exactly where they were supposed to. Box office numbers crossed the line everyone watches but pretends not to care about. Agents, publicists, even competitors have already checked in, some with excitement, some with calculation. But one call hasn't come. Not yet. He glances at the phone again without moving his head. A habit built over years. You don't stare at the phone in this town, you let it come to you. You can almost feel the tension in the room, not panic, not anger, something colder, something more precise. This call isn't about praise, it never is, it's about recognition, positioning, confirmation. In Hollywood, after a hit, there is a ritual no one puts in writing. The courtesy call. It usually comes from a studio head, sometimes a producer with authority, occasionally an executive who just wanted to say congratulations in a voice that's a little too casual to be accidental. The words are simple, the meaning is not. It says, "We see what you just did." It says, "You're still in the circle." It says, "We're already thinking about what comes next." It also quietly asks a question. How available are you going to be? Tonight the phone doesn't ring. At first, that's normal. These calls aren't immediate. No one wants to look overeager. Power waits, power times itself. By 10 o'clock, the house is quieter. The city lights feel farther away now. The machine is still silent. And that's when the thought forms, not fully, not consciously, but enough to register in the body before the mind wants to admit it. This wasn't forgotten. It was omitted. Hollywood almost never confronts directly, it adjusts temperature instead, it delays, it withholds, it lets silence do the work of speech. He's been here long enough to know the difference. This isn't about liking the movie, this isn't about money, the film already did what it needed to do, this is about leverage, about who calls first, about who confirms whose value. And tonight confirmation is absent. You can feel the internal calculation begin, not frantic, not dramatic, but surgical. Did I say something? Did I wait too long to answer a message? Did I decline something they expected me to accept? None of these questions have answers yet, that's the point. Silence creates self-interrogation, it always has. In the industry, validation withdrawal is one of the most effective tools there is. No threats, no memos, just a pause where reassurance used to be. By midnight, the night has officially passed its window. If the call were coming, it would have come. He doesn't pace, he doesn't complain, he doesn't call anyone to ask. Instead, something quieter happens. A realization, not dramatic, not emotional, but structural. The relationship has changed. Not officially, not publicly, but in the way that matters most in Hollywood, the unspoken understanding of where you stand. And here's the unsettling part. Nothing bad has happened. No scandal. No bad press. No failed project. Just absence. That's how Hollywood shifts power without ever touching it. As he turns off the lights and walks down the hallway, there's no decision yet, no declaration, just a subtle tightening. A new awareness that availability is no longer being taken for granted by him because it may already be taken for granted by them. The phone remains silent. But something else has started ringing. A question that won't go away. If access is currency, why am I spending it without being asked anymore? The next morning arrives without urgency. Sunlight cuts across the kitchen counter. Coffee brews. Newspapers land in driveways across the city carrying box office numbers that confirm what everyone already knows. The film is a success. Phones are ringing elsewhere. Agents are fielding inquiries, publicists are scheduling appearances, studio assistants are updating internal lists, who's hot, who's stable, who needs watching. But still no call. And that's when the silence stops being neutral. In Hollywood, silence has grammar, it has punctuation, it has intent. A missed call isn't absence, it's information delivered without fingerprints. The courtesy call isn't about congratulations, it's about continuity. It reassures the star that the machine is still aligned behind them, that momentum will be protected, that future access will flow easily. When that call doesn't come, something else fills the space. Interpretation. You can almost feel how the mind begins working through possibilities, not emotionally but strategically. This isn't insecurity, it's pattern recognition. Years in the system teach you when something deviates from rhythm. The studio didn't forget. Studios don't forget money. This is calibration. Hollywood rarely punishes directly. That would require explanation, and explanation creates resistance. Instead, it applies pressure through delay. It lets the absence of warmth cool a relationship without ever declaring it frozen. What changed wasn't the star's talent, it wasn't their market value. It was perception of control. In recent months, he had said not yet more often, asked for longer reads, requested space between projects, declined a fast-tracked sequel meeting, nothing dramatic, nothing disrespectful. But in a system built on constant availability, even mild resistance reads as friction. The industry rewards reliability more than brilliance. Reliability means predictability. Predictability means leverage for the people making the calls. When someone becomes slightly less predictable, the system tests them. Not by attacking, by going quiet. Psychologically, this is where pressure sharpens, not because something is happening, but because nothing is happening and you're expected to respond anyway. Should he follow up? Should his agent check in? Should he casually remind them he's open? These are the invisible negotiations most viewers never see. The internal debates that never reach press but shape entire careers. And here's the trap. If he reaches out, he restores the old dynamic. He signals that access is still freely available, that silence makes him uncomfortable enough to move first. If he doesn't, the silence stretches. Hollywood notices who blinks. Days pass, then weeks. The film continues performing. Awards conversations begin circulating quietly, yet still nothing from the place where the call should have originated. This isn't rejection. It's assessment. They're watching how he handles the gap. Does he fill it with availability? Does he rush back into the machine? Or does he let the absence stand? For the first time in years, he does something unexpected. He doesn't chase the reassurance. He slows down. Not as a statement, not as a strategy, at least not consciously, more like an instinctive withdrawal, a protective reflex. If recognition is conditional, then presence must be reconsidered. This is where the emotional shift begins, not in anger, not in pride, but in clarity. He starts declining meetings that would have once felt automatic. He delays responses that don't respect his time. He lets the phone ring longer before answering. Not to punish anyone, but to see what happens next. And that's when the industry starts to feel it. Because Hollywood is comfortable with stars who are eager. It is far less comfortable with stars who are calm in silence. Somewhere in an office far from Mulholland Drive, someone notices the delay. Someone remarks that he's less reachable. Someone else shrugs and says, "Let's give it time." Time in Hollywood is never neutral. It rearranges power. And as the pause stretches, something unexpected begins to happen, not outside but inside. The need for immediate validation starts to loosen. The silence that once felt like pressure begins to feel like space. And space once claimed is hard to give back. The courtesy call never comes. But something else does. A choice still unspoken, that availability will no longer be automatic. And Hollywood, whether it realizes it yet or not, is being forced to adjust. January 6, 1997. 9:10 a.m. A quiet production office just off Sunset Boulevard. A script sits unopened on a polished desk. It arrived 3 days ago. In another year, it would have been read the same afternoon, notes dictated by evening, a meeting scheduled by the end of the week. Instead, it waits. Not as a tactic, not as a message. As a consequence. When the courtesy call never came, something subtle rewired. The urgency to stay synchronized with the industry's tempo dissolved. The old reflex to stay ahead of momentum at all costs no longer felt natural. This wasn't rebellion. It was restraint. Hollywood operates on a belief so ingrained no one questions it: visibility equals power. If you're not present, you're forgotten. If you slow down, someone faster replaces you. But that belief only holds if the system controls the clock. The moment someone steps outside the rhythm, without collapsing, the system has to reevaluate. Meetings are delayed, calls are returned later, decisions take time. Not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. Agents sense it first, not alarm but confusion. "Everything okay?" one asks casually. "Yes," he says and means it. That answer lands differently than expected. Because nothing is wrong. The pause isn't reactive, it's protective, a recalibration born from understanding, not hurt feelings. He begins choosing absence over explanation. Not responding immediately. Not filling silence with reassurance. Not volunteering availability to stabilize other people's expectations. Psychologically, this is a turning point. For years, approval flowed predictably. Praise, access, opportunity. Now that it's been withheld once, its absence exposes how much emotional weight it carried. But instead of chasing it, he lets the gap exist. And something unexpected happens. The pressure moves outward. Producers start asking questions they never had to ask before. Is he interested? Has he read it yet? Do we still have a shot? Uncertainty enters rooms where certainty once lived. Hollywood is excellent at managing talent. It is far less comfortable managing ambiguity. And ambiguity is exactly what the pause creates. This is the paradox the industry rarely acknowledges. Constant availability reduces perceived value over time. When access is guaranteed, urgency disappears. When presence is conditional, attention sharpens. Weeks turn into months. Fewer projects, fewer meetings, no public explanation. From the outside, it looks like a slowdown. From the inside, it feels like control returning. The absence isn't loud enough to become a headline, not dramatic enough to spark rumors, but it's consistent enough to register. Executives begin adjusting how they approach him. Pitches become more careful. Offers arrive with more flexibility. Timelines stretch to accommodate his pace, not theirs. The system, sensing it can no longer assume compliance, begins negotiating again. And that's the quiet shift. Not a demand for power, but a refusal to surrender it. The emotional core of this pause isn't dominance, it's self-preservation. The realization that being endlessly accommodating doesn't just exhaust you, it erodes leverage. By stepping back without explanation, he forces the industry to confront a question it hates answering. What if he doesn't need us as much as we thought? Hollywood recalibrates slowly, not out of respect, out of necessity. Because when a star stops running, the machine has to decide whether to slow down or lose them. And somewhere in that recalibration, the meaning of the missed courtesy call becomes clear. It wasn't a dismissal. It was a test. And the response, silence matched with silence, has quietly changed the balance. But the most important shift hasn't happened in boardrooms yet. It's happening internally. Because once you learn that absence can protect you, returning to constant availability becomes almost impossible. September 18, 1998. 6:25 p.m. A quiet screening room on a studio lot that hasn't changed much in 40 years. The lights come up slowly, no applause, no chatter, just a low shuffle of executives collecting their thoughts before they collect their coats. This is not a premiere, no press, no photos, just decision makers watching something they want to work. The tone in the room is different than it used to be. There was a time when his name alone simplified conversations, budgets flexed, schedules bent, everyone assumed access. Now no one assumes anything. And that uncertainty has done something strange to the room. It has made them careful, not cautious, considerate. Offers are no longer framed as expectations. They arrive with options, with patience built in, with phrases that didn't used to be necessary. Whenever you're ready. No rush at all. Take the time you need. Hollywood never says these things unless it has to. What changed wasn't demand. It was leverage. The pause, never announced, never explained, forced the industry to reevaluate how much it depended on predictability. When a star steps back and doesn't disappear, the old equations break down. He didn't flood the market with replacements, he didn't chase relevance through volume, he simply waited. And waiting when you can afford it is power. Psychologically, this is the moment the internal shift solidifies. The old fear that slowing down would cost him everything fails to materialize, instead the opposite occurs. The less he explains, the more his presence carries weight. The more selective he becomes, the more projects shape themselves around his boundaries. Hollywood adapts not because it respects boundaries, but because it needs what sits behind them. This is how influence actually works in the industry. Not through demands, not through public standoffs, but through quiet refusal to operate on borrowed urgency. What no one says out loud is that the courtesy call never mattered on its own. What mattered was how he responded to its absence. Most stars fill that silence with reassurance. They rush to remind the system they're still cooperative, still grateful, still available. He didn't. And in doing so, he forced the system to renegotiate terms it never thought would be questioned. Internally, something else changed too. The emotional dependency on external validation weakened. Approval became optional instead of essential. Identity stopped being reinforced by constant participation. That's the psychological cost Hollywood never talks about, the erosion of self that comes from always being on. By stepping back, he didn't just protect his career. He protected his internal authority. Now when the phone rings, it rings differently, not as a test, not as a summons. As an invitation. And invitations can be declined. The industry never admits it adjusted. There was no memo, no meeting, no apology for the silence that started it all. But everyone in that screening room feels it. The power dynamic has shifted, not explosively but permanently. Because once someone proves they can pause without collapsing, Hollywood has to treat them differently. It has no other choice. And that missed courtesy call, once unsettling, once ambiguous, now reads clearly in hindsight. It was the moment the old rules stopped applying. The moment a career stopped being managed and started being contained. November 3, 2002. 8:14 a.m. A hotel room overlooking a city he's worked in for decades, but no longer rushes through. Morning light filters through the curtains. The phone is on the desk, face down, not unplugged, just irrelevant for the moment. Years have passed since the call that never came. No one mentions it now, not because it was insignificant, but because it quietly did its work. The industry adjusted, slowly, reluctantly, permanently. He works less, but nothing about his presence feels reduced. If anything, it's denser. Projects arrive shaped around him rather than aimed at him. Collaborations feel deliberate instead of automatic. This is the long-term consequence Hollywood rarely anticipates when it withholds validation as leverage. Some people break. Others withdraw and become harder to move. Legacy isn't built by volume, it's built by discernment. The pause taught him that availability is not generosity, it's exposure, and exposure when unmanaged depletes authority. Psychologically, something crucial stabilized during those quieter years. The need to be continuously affirmed dissolved. Self-trust replaced external confirmation. Decisions came from alignment instead of momentum. And Hollywood felt that shift even if it couldn't articulate it. Because when someone stops needing the system emotionally, the system loses its sharpest tool. Fear. Fear of missing out. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of losing relevance. He proved those fears weren't automatic consequences. And that proof echoed. You can trace it in the way later negotiations unfolded, in the patience extended, in the respect that wasn't loud but consistent. Other actors noticed too, quietly, not publicly, not in interviews. They saw that stepping back didn't erase him. It clarified him. This is the hidden lesson of the missed courtesy call. Power in Hollywood doesn't always move toward noise. Sometimes it moves toward silence, the kind that isn't empty but intentional. By refusing to chase reassurance, he redefined his relationship with the machine. He stopped being reactive, stopped being endlessly available, stopped organizing his worth around response time. And in doing so, he altered not just his career trajectory, but his emotional survival within it. The call never came, but what replaced it was something far more valuable. Control over pace. Control over presence. Control over self. Hollywood still doesn't talk about moments like this. They're too subtle, too internal, too difficult to credit without admitting how power actually works. But careers are shaped by these moments. The ones no one announces. The ones no one explains. The ones that happen quietly, on nights when the phone doesn't ring. And if you listen closely, that silence tells you everything.